So if you struggle with setting boundaries and having healthy boundaries, you're probably dealing with a trifecta in your mental realm of invalidation, fear, and distrust. Go into all three. First, I'm going to share about late stage control in family systems, and even this can apply to like friend groups and your overall environment and the people you surround yourself with. So if you currently struggle with healthy boundaries or setting boundaries with people, it's very likely that you have surrounded yourself with people who also struggle with boundaries, lack boundaries, or respond negatively to others' boundaries. And so late stage control in family systems is when one abuser or narcissist power goes unchecked. And this dynamic is created within the family that looks like peace and maybe looks like community, but under the surface, everyone is just following the narcissist's rules. And somewhere deep inside, you know what would happen if you stepped out of those rules and those roles, and you have this memory in your body of this wound of why you opted to abandon yourself in this way of not having boundaries, and why you gave up your boundaries in the first place. You were conditioned and trained at some point in your life with some wound. You learn that it was unsafe to set limits with people, to choose what you will and will not tolerate. And specifically for people who are resistant to change, deeply unconscious people who don't change themselves, people who are the same person they were 10 years ago, they are also going to be resistant to you changing. This is especially true for narcissistic or enmeshed individuals, enmeshed parents, enmeshed family. Who unconsciously categorize you as an extension of themselves. So if they're resistant to their own growth, they're not really seeing you as your own individual. They're also going to be resistant to your growth. And you can feel that. You know that. And there's this intuition that you have that you may not be aware of, that if you change in this way, that it's going to crumble the shaky foundations that all of your current relationships are built on. And so most people in my life that I've observed, we're going to talk about the first trifecta, which is distrust. Most people in my life that I've observed that struggle with boundaries, enabling others, or, being controlled by others, they always lack self-trust. And on my personal journey, my season of learning boundaries coincided with me learning how to trust myself. And so I learned self-trust through a deeply traumatic, intense relationship and betrayal. And I hope that in sharing this video with you, you don't have to learn boundaries and self-trust in the way that I did. But yeah, I tend to look at some of my family members and I see how they don't trust themselves, and I feel this sense of sadness, like, I wish they just trusted themselves. And so the thing is that it's really difficult to set a boundary with someone when you can't fully trust your read on them or your perception of their behavior. And it already takes a level of self-trust to, intend to create a boundary for yourself and stick to it. That's like the basic level of self-trust. But there's also the level of self-trust is you have to be able to know that your boundary is valid, that your boundary is necessary. And so I guess we could add self-worth to the trifecta. Know that you are worth having boundaries, that you are worth better treatment, that you deserve better treatment. But yeah, so let's go into the second one, which is invalidation. So this directly relates to distrust. So if you invalidate your own feelings, when someone that you would have boundaries with, if you didn't invalidate your feelings, when they provoke feelings in you like anger or sadness or irritation, and you automatically either suppress or invalidate those feelings, it's like you're not getting the feeling feedback that tells you when a boundary needs to be put in place. Because really how we set boundaries is by, tuning into our feelings, our true feelings. And I'm going to go on a little side topic here though, because your boundaries are going to be created by your feelings mixed with your desires and your values. So if you desire love and connection, your boundaries and your feelings are going to be fine-tuned into what makes you feel unloved, what makes you feel disconnected. Whereas with narcissistic people, their boundaries tend to be skewed towards control. So it's like what makes them feel out of control, what makes them feel like they can't control another is what provokes the feelings where they set really unhealthy boundaries, like telling you what you can and can't do in order to be with them, that type of thing. And so the third part of the trifecta, this is the most important one, and this is fear. So earlier we talked about how in childhood you had these things happen where when you set boundaries, maybe when you said no, maybe when you pushed back against your parents or the people or the adults in your life, you learned very quickly that that was unsafe. And so what happens when a child goes through this type of trauma is the way I love to think about it. This concept I use a lot. It's almost like you get frozen in time. So it's like you have a part of you, your childhood self, part of your energy that is within your body that is frozen in time. So while your adult human consciousness is interacting with people, you have that part of you inside of yourself who is seeing through the lens that everyone is extremely dangerous and that you are still powerless. Because as a child, you didn't have the power to protect yourself from unhealthy adults or set boundaries if you needed to. You were powerless. And so when you get frozen in time like that, you're seeing everyone through this lens that isn't necessarily true. And it's likely that when you lack self-trust and boundaries, your body kind of puts everyone into one category, and that category is no one's safe to set boundaries with. Whereas the more healthy version of self that you would want to move to is observing people and their behavior, and through that observation and evidence, using your best judgment to identify whether or not this person is safe to set boundaries with. And so if you automatically assume no one is safe to set boundaries with, it's like you don't know who you can and can't set boundaries with. And this is more complicated, if you have someone in your life, even like a partner who you're in that late stage control type of thing with, it's like you may have never done the things that would cause negative reactions to this person, but if you did now, it would kind of destroy your current foundations of what you've built in your life. And that is something that creates fear as well, because somewhere inside you, like I said, what will happen if you change in this way. And it's a freedom though. It's like you're afraid of freedom. And it's up to you. It's your choice, of what you want to do. Personally, I prefer to have boundaries, but there are a lot of people who prefer to keep the peace in their family and their relationships, and that's okay too. But just know that there is more for you if you want more. If you want different types of relationships with truly healthy people, know that it is possible for you and it can come to you. So let's talk a little bit more about fear. So I am basing this entire video off of my personal experiences. I don't have the experience of one-on-one clients like other people may, so I don't have as much knowledge on this, but fear is, oh yeah, so you're frozen in time. And that part of you that's frozen in time, that child self, it has this fear of people and this powerlessness. And what you will have to do is kind of reintegrate that part of you into your current self and kind of let it see through your adult eyes and like let it know that it's not in the past anymore and we aren't powerless anymore. We aren't the child anymore, and like we can handle ourselves, that type of thing. I remember when I uncovered this in my own consciousness, I just had this deep fear that my parents specifically were like these big scary monsters. I guess my child self categorized them as big scary monsters. And I had this integration moment of this part of myself where I realized like they're not the big scary people that they once were when I was a child. Now, I'm currently writing an ebook that I'm going to have for sale soon. I'm still working out the details, where I teach you how to trust yourself based on how I learned how to trust myself all by myself, self-guided through the intense pain that I went through. And there'll be a couple methods to learn how to trust yourself. And we do this by cutting our energetic ties from the past. And building self-trust is actually, it's really easy, but we have to start in the past and we have to start with the root and kind of go back and see where we didn't trust ourselves in the past and kind of reintegrate those parts of ourselves. Integration is a big part. And so in late stage, unhealthy boundaries like toxic environments, we almost become conditioned to like normalize people's behavior on a whole nother level, where it's like we don't even really recognize the behaviors around us that are wrong. Like it becomes so ingrained, this like toxic way of being that is really just denial disguised as peace, becomes so ingrained into the self that's where like enabling comes in, where you just like don't know that there's anything different for you. And especially since like people who have healthy boundaries tend to be attracted to others with healthy boundaries. And so, you are an amazing person. You're a beautiful individual. And it's not that you aren't worth healthy people, but then you tend to like stay around the people who lack boundaries. And a lot of times in the mix of that are narcissistic people who will punish boundaries. And so I would ask yourself a question like, who in my life would react the most negatively if I set a boundary with them? And maybe see if you can like look back into your past. When were times, see if you can think of a few times where you did set a boundary with someone and what was the outcome of it? Oh yeah, I'll talk a little bit more about validation. A lot of us have the wound of our fears being invalidated. I think especially in spirituality, fear is kind of demonized as this really bad thing. But when a child is afraid, what that child deserves is care and love and reassurance. Though what many of us experience as child when we're afraid is dismissal, lack of consideration, lack of care. And so if you have a fear of setting boundaries or any fear at all, your fear deserves to be taken seriously. And so if you're doing any reflection about boundaries and fear, what you really want to do is look at yourself and how you're feeling and what you're fearing look at it like it's so real and so valid. Like it makes so much sense for you to feel like that. Because that's a big thing too, is that the reason why you don't have boundaries is good reason. Your body let go of your boundaries, didn't create them. One reason is because it may not have been modeled to you, but also because it was protecting you. But now you can step in and protect yourself. But your fears are valid. They deserve to be heard and seen. And in doing that, you are actually able to release them. I hope this video was helpful for you. My name is Abigail Ellington. And if you enjoyed this video, your likes and your comments help me a lot. And you can watch my next video here.